You ever hear the one about the boy who shouldn't veer lived? Most folks up here whisper it around campfires or when the snow comes early, like it's still sacred. I didn't believe it myself, not till I found that half-collapsed cabin up along Black Hollow Ridge, half swallowed by pine and snowdrift. That's where I saw the paw prints, not fresh, but steady, like they'd gone in and out for months. Same trail, same steps. That's where it started for me, and once I started digging, well, I reckon I've never looked at winter the same since. They say it happened near the end of the old cattle drives, when the rails were creeping west and men were getting meaner 'cause the frontier was closing. And some family tried to make a go of it up there, in the teeth of the mountains. Nobody remembers their name now. All that's left is this one boy. Folks say he was maybe 10, quiet, wore a red scarf. Nobody knew his birthday, not even his mother, rest her soul. All we got's the legend. And the dog. The story goes, his PA had gone missing before the first snowfall, hunting elk with 2 other men. Never came back. By December, the smoke from their cabin vanished, and come January, the townsfolk stopped looking. Just one of those things happens out here. You say a prayer and you move on. But the boy didn't die. Somehow, deep in those woods, in a cabin nobody checked. That child survived the coldest winter the High Pass had seen in 20 years, with no firewood chopped, no canned goods left, just the snow, the dark, and the sound of wind dragging its claws across the roof. And the dog Dot, no one ever saw it coming or going. Not once, but one trapper, name was Eli Dorsey, swears he spotted a big black dog dragging half a hare through the storm, headed uphill. Thought it was strange, dogs don't run free out here. Not that far out, not in that weather. But he shrugged it off. Said something about the way it moved, didn't feel like wild instinct, more like duty. When spring thawed the ridgeline, couple riders finally went up to check the place, just to make it official. Clear out the cabin if there were bones. What they found didn't make sense. The boy was alive, barely skin and bones, curled up beside a dead wolfhound. It had gone stiff just a few nights before, still had snow on its back. The boy was clutching its fur like it was a blanket. He didn't speak for a week. When he did, he asked where his friend had gone. Folks figured it must have been a miracle, or madness. Some still do, but I seen that trail with my own eyes. I seen the old boards where the snow had been scraped smooth, week after week. I seen the teeth marks in the meat rack, where the dog hung rabbits like some wild soldier running errands for a boy too small to even light a fire. The mountain kept its silence, but the prints told the truth. So now, every time the wind shifts just right and I catch that low, distant howl, I don't chalk it up to coyotes anymore. Some say the dog was a ghost. Some say it was sent by the boy's father. Me, I think it was just love, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't ask anything in return. And there's more to tell. 'Cause the boy, well, he didn't stay a boy forever. If this legend already has you leaning in, I reckon you might want to stick around. There's a whole lot more coming in the heart of this tale. It don't lie where you think. Go ahead and hit that subscribe if you like hearing stories that linger long after the last word. They called the boy Jesse. No last name, no record, just Jesse. And even that name came from a note nailed to the door of the doctor's shack when the riders brought him down. "This is Jesse," it said, scratched in a woman's trembling hand. "He's ours. Please help him." Doc Carver remembered that note better than anything else. Said he found Jesse on his table the morning after the blizzard broke, wrapped in an old wolf pelt that still smelled of ash and cedar. No one saw who left him. Whoever carried him down didn't wait, just rode out quiet, left before dawn. Some say it was a man on a red roan. Others claim they saw no hoofprints at all. Jesse didn't speak at first, just watched with eyes that had seen too much winter, too much hunger. His hands were raw, the skin on his feet cracked open, in lines that would scar permanent, but he was alive. That's what no one could explain. The only child in 100 miles who'd spent 4 months above the snow line with no food, no kindling, no family, and survived. Doc Carver tried to question him gently. "Where you from, son?" he asked once. Jesse just stared out the window at the falling snow, eyes tracking something invisible. After a long pause, he said, "He came every night." "Who did?" Jesse's lips barely moved. "The dog." The doc figured the boy had cracked, his mind gone soft from frostbite and grief. But when they laid out the boy's belongings, there were signs. a woven collar made from old saddle leather, a string of tiny bones, rabbit, squirrel, field mice strung like trophies on twine, and a patch of blood-stiffened fur tucked into his coat pocket. Not just fur black with silver tips. Wolfhound, no doubt. Word spread fast in town. Rumors always do. Some said Jesse had trained the beast himself. Others thought the dog was his mother's spirit, come back to protect him. But Jesse never added more when asked. He'd just say he stayed till spring. Then he'd go quiet. An old widow named Mabel took the boy in. Had no children of her own, and a warm kitchen that always smelled of cinnamon and tobacco. Jesse never asked for toys or sweets. Just a corner near the hearth, and Mabel's permission to sleep with the old dog blanket every night, the same one he'd been wrapped in when he arrived. He grew slow but strong, and always quiet. One day, about a year after the thaw, a stranger rode into town. Long coat, wide hat, deep scars along one cheek, like a bear had swiped him once, and let him live. Said he was looking for a boy that wore a red scarf. Claimed his name was Morgan, that he'd known the boy's father. The townsfolk were suspicious, but before they could warn Mabel, the man found Jesse out by the woodpile. He dismounted slow, kneeling to eye level with the boy. "You look just like him," Morgan whispered. Same jaw, same fire in the eyes. Jesse didn't answer. The man pulled something from his saddlebag, a wooden whistle, carved with a wolf's head on the end. "He made this, said to give it to you when the time came." Jesse took it without a word. But that night, Mabel said, the boy didn't sleep, just sat by the window, turning that whistle over and over in his hands, as if it held a secret too heavy for words. Morgan didn't stay long. He never asked to sleep indoors, just tethered his horse behind the saloon and slept under his saddle blanket like a man used to cold ground and colder company. Folks kept their distance, but he wasn't rude. He drank his coffee black, never played cards, and always sat where he could watch the door. He spoke to Jesse twice more. The first time was outside the church. When the boy was hauling wood for Mabel, Morgan leaned down and said, "Your PA was no coward. You know, he didn't run." Jesse didn't stop stacking logs. "Then why didn't he come back?" Morgan hesitated. His voice softened like wind through dry grass. "'Cause he got caught between what he owed and what he loved. Sometimes a man don't get to choose both." The second time came a week later, when Morgan met Jesse at the edge of town just after dusk. The boy was sitting by the fence where the road disappeared into the Trezame trail that led up toward the ridge. He held the whistle in one hand, a piece of jerky in the other. Morgan dismounted, quiet as dusk. "You've been thinking about going back up there, haven't you?" he asked. Jesse didn't answer, just looked at the trees like they were speaking in a language only he understood. Morgan crouched beside him. "That ridge won't give you anything easy, but if you want the truth, that's where it's buried." He left the boy with a compass, wrapped in oilskin. The same night, he rode out again. Nobody saw where he went. Spring turned to summer. Jesse began walking farther from town, always alone. Mabel worried, of course, but she didn't stop him. She said it was like the mountains were calling him back, like some part of him had never come down from there. Then, one morning, he was gone, left a note on the hearth. Just 5 words. "I have to go back." Mabel found his bed still warm, the old blanket folded neatly, the wooden whistle gone. He took nothing else. No one chased after him, not out of fear, but respect. Folks understood, in the quiet way frontier folks do, that some journeys have to be walked alone. Days passed, then weeks. No sign. Until the trapper, Eli Dorsey, the same man who'd once seen the dog in the snow, rode into town pale as milk. Said he'd seen the boy up near the timberline. Jesse was sitting on a rock ledge, feet dangling over a sheer drop, his face turned up to the wind like he was listening for something. Said the boy looked older somehow. Not in years, but in knowing, like he'd remembered something the rest of us had forgotten. And standing beside him was a dog, not a puppy, not some wild mutt, a wolfhound, massive, black, silent eyes the color of burning coal. Eli swore it was the same one, the very same, but that wasn't possible. The dog had died. Eli blinked, and when he looked again, they were gone. They searched for Jesse after that. Mabel, the sheriff, even a couple of ranch hands who owed Doc Carver a favor. But the trail ended at the tree line, where the snow still lingered in the shadows, and the wind carried voices that weren't theirs. One of the horses spooked so bad he threw his rider and bolted. That was enough for the rest to turn back. Mabel stood at the edge of that forest for near an hour, clutching Jesse's old coat in her hands, like it might call him home. But she didn't cry. Mabel was fronter tough, and she knew in her bones that Jesse wasn't lost, just walking a path most couldn't follow. She left a candle burning in the window each night, and every morning she checked the porch for footprints. They never came. But weeks later, strange things started happening near the old ridge. A hunter named Boone found a fresh kill-cleaned split, and hanging in the trees though he hadn't set a trap. Said the cuts were too neat, too practiced, like someone had learned to carve with patience, not panic. Another man, hauling lumber across the high pass, said he spotted smoke winding out of a chimney that should have been cold for years. He went to check, but by the time he reached the cabin, the place was silent, empty, but warm. The strangest tale came from a girl named Clara, just 16, who'd gotten lost in a sudden snow squall late one afternoon. Said she'd wandered for hours, feet frozen, cheeks bleeding from wind, when a dog appeared out of nowhere, big and black, with a white scar across its muzzle. It didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared at her until she followed, led her straight to an old fire pit, still glowing. There was a bed of pine boughs, a canteen, and a wool blanket that smelled faintly of cedar smoke. She swore a boy sat nearby, barely older than herself. Said he never spoke, just nodded once, and handed her the canteen. When she woke the next morning, she was alone. The snow had stopped. The fire was dead. But beside her was a strip of jerky, and tucked into her coat pocket a whistle, carved with a wolf's head. The sheriff didn't believe her, but Doc Carver did. So did Mabel, and so did Morgan, who rode back into town 3 days later, looking thinner, harder, but with eyes burning like lantern glass. He didn't ask where Jesse was. He just asked, "Has he come back yet?" Nobody answered. Morgan stayed that night in the saloon, speaking to no one, staring into his drink like it held ghosts, and before dawn, he vanished again. Meanwhile, the story spread. The boy who lived, the wolfhound who returned. Some folks claimed they were spirits. Others said they were protectors of the mountains, watching over the lost. Even skeptics started leaving offerings by the ridge trail, cans of beans, knives, bits of jerky wrapped in cloth. No one admitted why, but deep down, they were hoping the legend was true. Because if Jesse was alive, if he'd found a way to survive the worst the mountains could offer, then maybe there was still a place in this world where love didn't die. It just changed shape, into fur, into wind, into a boy with quiet eyes, and a dog that didn't stay dead. One autumn evening, nearly 2 years after Jesse disappeared into the ridge, a merchant from a mining town south of the pass arrived in our quiet little settlement with a story no one could ignore. He'd been caught in a rock slide halfway up Devil's Backbone, thrown from his mule and pinned beneath a slab of shale. Said he thought that was it, his lungs were squeezing shut. Night was coming fast, and he'd already said goodbye to his kids in his mind. Then he heard it. Footsteps, not boots, bare feet. When he opened his eyes, he saw a boy, thin, quiet, maybe 13 now, with wind-burned cheeks and eyes that didn't blink. The boy didn't say a word, just crouched, checked the merchant's leg, and pulled a hand-forged pry bar from Asatiel. He lifted the rock just enough to free the man's leg, splintered it with branches and twine. Then he did something strange. He pulled out a bit of meat, dried and smoked, and offered it without a word. Behind him stood a massive dog, black and still as a statue, its head cocked like it understood every motion. The boy waited until the man could drink from his canteen. Then he disappeared into the dusk, vanishing between the aspens like he was part of the forest itself. Didn't speak a word, the merchant said, shaking his head. But I'd swear on my mother's grave it was Jesse, and that dog of his, still alive. The townsfolk didn't argue anymore. Some said Jesse had become something more than a boy, like the mountains had claimed him and given him back as their guardian. Others believed he was still flesh and blood, but changed, sharpened by silence, hardened by seasons most grown men wouldn't survive. They said he was out there watching, helping those the land tried to swallow. Mabel kept his old room just the same, dusted the windowsill every week, left food on the porch when the nights turned cold. Sometimes it disappeared by morning, sometimes not. But once, she found a bundle, wrapped in pine bark. Inside were 6 wild mushrooms, a clean rabbit pelt, and a note scratched on birch bark in Jesse's hand. It read, Thank you for letting me go." Doc Carver said little, but each winter he quietly packed extra supplies into canvas sacks and left them by the ridge trail. No name, no question. Dot. And as for Morgan, he returned once more. This time, he carried a journal. Dot said it belonged to Jesse's father. It was full of rough sketches of the cabin, the trail, even a map leading beyond the known ridge paths to a place marked only with a cross and the word, home. Morgan handed the journal to Mabel, then walked up the mountain without looking back. He never came down. Some say he joined Jesse. Some say he found peace. I think he finally kept a promise. And maybe you're wondering, why am I telling you this? Why now? Because legends, like this one, don't just fade. They live in the hearts of those who still believe in loyalty, in survival, in something purer than the world we see every day. That if Jesse's story stirred something in you, if it made you pause, even for a moment, go ahead and like the video, or leave a comment about what you think happened to that boy. And if you want to follow the trail all the way to the end, make sure to subscribe. There's still more to this legend, and trust me, it's worth the walk. By the third winter since Jesse vanished, folks had stopped calling him a lost child. Now they called him the Ridge Boy, name spoken softly, like part warning, part prayer. You'd hear it in the saloon, whispered between sips of rye, or among freight drivers before they crossed high ground, pressing their fingers to the brim of their hats and muttering, "Hope, the Ridge Boy's watching." Not all tales were gentle. A prospector out of New Dawson claimed he'd heard something one night that made his blood go stiff. Said he'd been hauling gear near the old mine trail when he spotted a campfire burning low up on a ledge. Thought maybe he'd found someone to share coffee with, so he climbed. But when he reached the clearing, there was no one, only a stack of bones, stripped clean, rabbit maybe, or squirrel, and a string of carved wooden charms tied to a tree branch. He turned to leave but said he caught a glimpse, just for a second, of two eyes watching from behind the brush, low, steady, yellow in the firelight. He didn't stick around to find out if it was man or beast. The next morning, all his traps were sprung. Nothing stolen, just snapped clean, left open like someone had set everything free. Still, most stories carried gratitude. A girl who broke her leg near Bear Creek said a boy lifted her from the snow and disappeared before she could say thank you. A rancher's son, lost in a whiteout, followed a set of paw prints that led him straight to safety. Always the same quiet, wild kindness, and always the dog, just out of reach. Then, one evening, Doc Carver found something on his porch. Wrapped in canvas, soaked from melting snow, was a bundle of hand-drawn maps, detailed, recent, marked with trails even the oldest trappers didn't know. Rivers, tracks, cabins, long abandoned, and in the corner of one page, a single note: "This winter will be worse. Help them." It was signed, simply. J-Doc didn't speak for a long time after that, just poured himself a cup of black coffee and stared out the window toward the mountains. The next day, he organized a supply run to the High Valley homesteads, packing flour, blankets, medicine stuff most towns forgot after first snow. Said the boy was warning them. Said Jesse wasn't just surviving up there, he was watching, protecting. And that's the part most folks miss. They think this story's about a child who didn't die, but it's not. It's about what he became. He wasn't the same Jesse who'd sat silent in Mabel's parlor, clutching a dog blanket to his chest. That Jesse had been forged into something different through fire, frost, and friendship that walked on four legs and never spoke a word. He became a shadow on the ridgeline, a howl that never quite belonged to a coyote, a set of eyes in the storm, looking out not for himself, but for others. And somewhere deep in the pass, beyond the reach of roads and reason, he was building something, a home, a place, a purpose. People started calling it the boy's cabin, but no one had ever seen it. Not yet. They say you can only find Jesse's cabin if you're meant to, that it doesn't show itself on any map, even the ones he drew. You don't stumble onto it by accident either. Some swear it shifts with the seasons, like the mountains are helping to hide it, keeping it safe, the way they did the boy all those years ago. But it was found, once. A woman named Ruth, early 30s, had been fleeing her husband, a miner, from down south, mean drunk, hands like hammers. She rode with no saddle, just a thin coat and a satchel of dried beans, following rumors and the edge of desperation. 3 days into the high pass, her horse slipped, shattered its leg. She tried to put it down clean, but her pistol jammed. She cried, right there in the snow, her hands too numb to fix anything, her breath fogging into nothing. That's when the dog appeared. Big, black, muzzle gray now, but eyes steady. She said it didn't approach, didn't snarl, just stood and waited, then turned and walked into the trees, glancing back once like it expected her to follow. So she did. She limped for miles, hours maybe. No idea which way was east. She said she nearly collapsed before she saw it, a narrow chimney breathing smoke, tucked into a rock face like the mountain had grown a shelter from stone and pine. The door creaked open. Before she could knock, and there he was. Jesse, older now, 15, maybe 16, tall and quiet, with hands like his father's strong from work, but careful in the way he poured her water and pressed a wool blanket into her arms. He didn't ask who she was, didn't ask why she was running, he just let her in. She stayed for 4 days, long enough to see how he lived. The cabin wasn't big, just one room, but every inch of it was kept with purpose: bundles of dried herbs, a wall of handmade tools, a shelf stacked with bandages, tinctures, rabbit pelts. There was a bow above the door, a carving knife tucked into a notch in the beam. Everything earned, everything needed. He barely spoke, but the dog, still alive, somehow slept beside the hearth like a watchman, always listening. On her last morning there, Jesse handed Ruth a map. It led her back down safely, skirting storms, marking shelters. Before she left, she touched his hand. "You saved me," she whispered. Jesse didn't look up, just said, soft as falling snow, "You'll help someone else now." And she did. Ruth became a midwife in a ridge town far east, built a life, raised 2 daughters, never married again, but she kept that map framed above her fireplace, and on the back, in pencil, Jesse had written just one word: stay. It meant more to her than any vow ever could. By the time word of Ruth's escape reached town, the stories had deepened. Jesse wasn't just a legend now, he was a symbol of resilience, of something clean and untouched by greed or cruelty. Some said he could speak to animals, others said he was part wolf, a changeling made from snow and silence. But the truth is, there's such a thing was simpler. He'd survived, with help, with loyalty, and now he was returning the favor, one stranger at a time, out of reach, but never truly gone. The winter Jesse turned 17. The mountains closed early. Snow came, in October, heavy, wet, and mean, the kind that pulled roofs down and snapped axles clean through. No one could travel more than 10 miles past the ridge without risking death, and folks who lived high up hunkered down with salted meat and crossed their fingers that their cellars would hold out till thaw. But Jesse didn't hunker. He moved. Over that season alone, 6 lives were saved by a boy no one could quite see. A couple trapped under a landslide found their tent replaced with fresh canvas one morning, their wounds dressed with pine salve. A half-frozen cowhand, abandoned by his crew, woke with a hot stone on his chest and kindling already burning in a dry ring of rocks. A family with sick children found boiled willow bark tea steeping on their porch, still warm. Jesse never took credit, he never waited for thanks. He left no footprints, only signs: a feather on a gate post, a scratch in the bark, shaped like a wolf's paw. Once, a single word carved into snow with the point of a stick: call and hold. And always, the sightings came, with the same detail: the dog, still alive, still watching, old now, but strong, like something more than muscle was holding him upright. Then, deep into January, something changed. A storm rolled in from the north, black, bitter, howling like it remembered blood. Winds tore the tops off trees. Ice fell sideways, slicing open anything foolish enough to stand still. The town locked down tight, and for 5 days, no one stirred. But when it broke, they saw the smoke, thin and sharp, rising from the direction of Devil's Hollow. Doc Carver and Mabel were the first to ride out. It took them a full day to reach the edge of the ridge, where the wind had scoured the earth clean. They found a shallow cave near the ravine, half by drift sand inside, a scene carved straight into memory. A young man sat cross-legged beside a dying fire, blankets wrapped around him, his hair longer now, face lean and weathered, but unmistakably Jesse. He wasn't alone. The dog lay beside him, head resting on Jesse's knee, chest rising slow, then slower. His eyes opened once, just enough to recognize the 2 familiar faces at the cave mouth. Then he exhaled, deep and long, like he was finally letting go. Jesse didn't cry. He just placed one hand on the dog's ribcage and whispered something no one else could hear. The flame flickered low. The wind outside softened. Mabel knelt and wrapped her arms around the boy, the way she'd done years ago when he first came down from the ridge. But he was taller than her now, and quieter, like the mountains had taught him to speak with fewer words and deeper truths. Doc didn't speak either, just built up the fire, opened his pack, and left food, water, a blanket too thick for one man, but perfect for two. When they left, Jesse stayed behind, not because he wasn't welcome, but because he still had more to do. He buried the dog the next morning, beneath a twisted pine where the sun always touched first. He marked the grave with a stone from the ridge, one he'd carried for years. Then he lit a fire beside it, and waited. Jesse waited beside that grave through the night, not because he thought the dog would return. He knew better. This time the silence was final, but the waiting that was part of it, part of honoring something that never left him, not once, not even when the world froze solid. At sunrise, he packed the blanket, shouldered his satchel, and walked north, not down the ridge, not back toward the town, or even toward the old cabin, north into deeper wilderness, where maps ended and the air turned thin. He didn't leave a trail, not even a broken branch. He walked like someone who didn't need to be followed anymore. But the mountains remembered him, and so did the people. By the time spring crept in, folks had begun leaving things at the grave. The pine where the dog was buried became a quiet place. A man left his grandfather's hunting knife there, wrapped in cloth. A little girl left her ribbon, blue and frayed. Mabel came once a year, sat beside the stone for an hour, said nothing, then walked back to town without a word. Doc Carver added a ring of stones, built low and wide, and told people to respect it. He buried more than a dog here, he said once. He buried the part of himself that could rest. And still the stories didn't stop. A boy gone missing in a thunderstorm was found asleep in a hollowed tree, wrapped in a dry cloak that didn't belong to him. A traveler from out east crashed his wagon axle near a ravine and swore someone led his horse to safety while he was passed out. His wife said he came home with a bone-carved pendant around his neck, shaped like a wolf's eye. No one saw Jesse. Again, not clearly, but the signs were there. Bootprints leading to a snowed-in homestead. A wooden whistle tied to a bedpost where a fever broke overnight. A single word scratched into dust across a cabin. Window still. Then came the fire. Lightning struck the old timberline that summer. It ripped through the pines and roared down the slope like the mountain was coughing up all its fury. Smoke blackened the sky for miles. Even the river turned dark from ash. People fled. But when it cleared, they found something no one expected. A break in the burn line, in natural, sharp, like someone had built a firebreak by hand. Trees felled in a perfect arc. Soil dug, stones placed, to guide the flames away from a hidden trail that would have led straight to 3 trapped families. The path they were on should have ended in smoke and death. Instead, they lived. One woman, holding her child, said she saw a figure in the haze. Just a shape, tall, still watching. And beside him, not a dog but a second figure, smaller, moving like a pup in fresh snow. No one believed it at first, but the paw prints were there, fresh. Side by side with Jesse's boots. The next winter came gentle, like the mountains were finally tired of punishment. Snow fell soft, winds stayed high but didn't bite so deep. And that year, fewer folks got lost, fewer went hungry, as if the land itself had taken a breath. Still, the legend of Jesse Lingard. Some said he'd gone deeper into the wild, where no compass worked. Others claimed he'd built a second cabin, farther north, and had taken to raising orphan pups from the woods, training them, the way his old companion once trained him. The stories blurred. Some were wishful, some were real, but one thing was clear. Jesse had become more than a boy who survived. He'd become something woven into the land itself. Every so often, someone would return from the high pass with a tale that didn't quite make sense. A child caught in a blizzard, carried to safety by a figure with a scar across his brow. A settler stranded by river flood, guided by a black pup with eyes like coal and a white ring around its neck. Messages left in pine needles. Fire pits still warm when no one was supposed to be there. Then, years later, long after Mabel passed, long after Doc Carver retired, a boy wandered into town. Not Jesse, but a stranger, maybe 10 years old, barefoot, sunburned, wearing a red scarf, too big for his neck. He didn't say much, just sat on the steps of the old post office and waited, as if expecting someone. The sheriff gave him a blanket. The townsfolk offered food. When asked where he came from, the boy pointed toward the mountains. He said, "I'd be safe here." The child murmured, "He said this place remembers." The sheriff knelt, trying not to spook him. "Who said that, son?" The boy looked up. His voice was calm. "The one with the dog." And in his pocket was a whistle, wooden, hand-carved, shaped like a wolf's head. "They say Jesse still walks the ridge line, that when the stars line up just right, you can see the flicker of a lantern far up the slopes, moving slow, steady, beside two sets of paws, one older, one fresh. They say he doesn't need saving anymore. Now he's the one who saves, not with glory, not with noise, but with quiet hands, with memory, with the simple, unshakable belief that no one should be left to freeze alone in the dark. So if you ever find yourself out there, wind howling through the trees, and you spot a shadow moving just ahead, don't run, don't shout, just wait. You might not see him, but if you're lucky, you'll feel it, that soft warmth in your bones that tells you you're not alone, that someone, somewhere, is still watching the trails, and that maybe a boy and a dog, once left behind, are still out there making sure the rest of us make it home. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, leave a comment and let us know what part stayed with you most. And if you believe in stories that bring warmth to cold places, go ahead and like the video, and subscribe for more tales from the forgotten corners of the West. There's always another firelight waiting in the dark.